Transport and Assets at Wiltshire Council.
Hi, I'm Hannah Fountain, Western Gateway's Senior Transport Officer. I'm on currently the Highways and Transport for North Somerset Council.
David Gray, I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment and Planning at the Gloucestershire County Council.
I'm Bill Davis, I'm the Transport Policy and Strategy Manager in the West of England Combined Authority.
Councillor Kyder from Bristol City Council. I'm here representing Dan Norris, the Mayor of the West of England Combined Authority.
Chris Wilmore, Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Infrastructure at South Gloucestershire Council.
I'm Chair of the Transport and Connectivity Committee at Bristol City Council.
Wiltshire and Public Sport Council.
Councillor John Andrews, I'm the Cabinet Member for Highways in Dorset Council.
Thank you.
And I'm James White, Technical Lead for the Western Gateway.
And can we go through the people we've got online as well? I'll start at the top. I can read from here. Matt.
Hi everybody, Matt Hayward, Network Rail Western Route.
And now you're all moving around. That's going to confuse me. Ross. Okay. Joseph.
Afternoon, everybody. Joe Parks, Senior Strategic Planner, Network Rail Wessex Route.
Arena.
Afternoon all, Arena Salhotra, Sphere Marketing, Communications Consultant for Western Gateway.
Patty.
Hi, Transport Officer for Western Gateway.
Councillor Hadley.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I can't be there in person. We just had cabinet. My name is Andy Hadley. I am have a portfolio for climate change, environment, and energy, which includes transport for BCP Council.
Thank you. I see we've got +3, so there are 3 people who haven't said anything yet. Can you introduce yourselves? Pam, I can see you're there, Pam.
Thanks, Amanda. Pam Toten, Head of Transport Strategy at Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Anyone else who hasn't said hello?
Hi, I'm Ben Kemper from the South West Area Team, Department for Transport.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And I'm Ross Burton, also from the Area team. I cover, I'm head of the Midlands and Southwest team. Ben is here for his first time. He'll be replacing David Glinos, who has formerly attended these meetings. I will take on David's sponsorship role in the short term. Thank you.
Welcome, Ross. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, everybody. I will try and keep us to time, but that depends on everyone else keeping to time. Welcome to our guests as well. Actions and minutes of the previous board meeting. Can I just ask you, James, to go through what we've done and what you said we were going to do?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the actions from the last meeting, there were only 2 actions from the last meeting. One was to circulate the objectives for the strategic investment plan work to each local authority, and also to circulate the slides which were shared at the last meeting on the strategic investment plan metrics to go to each local authority as well. And I'm moving across to my colleague Hannah just to double check and confirm that they were all sent to the local authorities.
I've already, it's only item 2 and I've already messed up slightly. Did we have any apologies?
We've had apologies just from some officers, Jess Holroyd and Mena Abidakam. They're both not here today. Dan Norris sends his apologies to the Mayor of the Combined Authority, but we do have Councillor Kai Dudd, and Mike O'Dowd Jones from Peninsula Transport, Somerset Council, also sends his apologies.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 3. This is down for 10 minutes. It may not take us 10 minutes because what I want to do is just put it out here as something that we all need to think about. Most of us are new to this board, and it is a time when we have a new government. There's lots of things that are new, so I just wanted to put it out there that we should give some thought as to how we can best use this time, because it's a big commitment for all of us to give the time to do this, and there are things that we can do best as a board when we're all together and have people joining us online, and things that are just information that we can possibly just share via email. So if anyone's got any good thoughts now, please feel free to perk up. but can I ask them if there are any thoughts about how we can maximise the benefit of having these meetings? If they could send them through to me and I will collate them with James and we'll come back next time with a kind of suggestion. And if the answer is, you know what, it's just perfect the way it is, that's fine, but let's do that knowingly. Is there anyone who's got any ideas now, or shall we get 5 minutes on track and then see if we can keep going? No? Excellent. So we have our public participation. You should have got the questions and the answers that have been circulated. Are there any people here, James, you believe, who wish to talk?
I believe it might just be about to come in, Chair.
There we go. Everyone, hello. That was absolute perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Online as well. What is that? This is. Oh, James. Hello, James.
Hello, Christine.
Yes, anywhere really, in the convenience.
There-
What's it called?
There's space over
There,
there.
yes, there.
Then you can get round there.
If you want.
The chair will get around there next. He's got a room full there.
Seat over there.
Okay.
So take that one.
Literally just got to item 4, which is public participation. I've confirmed that we have circulated all the questions and answers to the board, and I believe anyone who wishes to has got 2 minutes that they can address the board about the questions that they've already brought up. In no particular order, David.
Okay, well, I'll start then. So I suppose my concern is working closely with National Press Group and the excellent work that both Western Gateway and Peninsula are doing on coaches, which are very, very supportive of. The issue we're getting from National Express and from Scottish City, which know about Megabus, is the ability to run the rural services. The problem appears to be the lack of subsidy, and that subsidy is causing issues that we've now lost services that go through the southwest down to both Barnstable and across that's from Cheltenham all the way through Gloucestershire and Somerset West as it went down to Barnstable and Tiverton. And we've also lost the service that was based in Parliament recently, which is the service between London and Cornwall via Taunton and Oakhampton and down through Launceston. Now, if we carry on like that, we've already got one success, which is the Cheltenham, Birmingham, Bournemouth service that was put on those 6 years of work by this authority. But it has to be lobby through the transport bill for buses to make sure there are clauses to protect regional coach services through the strategic board network. Then coaches are going to fall off the edge, and we're going to end up with lots of parts of Southwest. We have simply have no rail services. You've got a wonderful new coach station in Cheltenham, £35 million, trying to the Southwest really. But we're not have coaches on that if we're not careful. So I think there's money invested in Salisbury, there's money invested in Western, there's money invested in Taunton, there's money being invested across the region in coach and bus stations. So the other piece of work is we also ask you to look at the regional bus network. We have issues at the moment between Wellands Edge and Yate, particularly, and that corridor from Stroud, which has been raised in Parliament and raised by MPs of all colours and debates. And crossing the border with Wecker and Gloucestershire is a real issue at the moment. But ideally, we need to map these regional bus networks and make sure they are protected so BSIP crosses the border. We had this debate yesterday. I feel if that meeting a few meetings ago to if their attitude towards Wecker working with the rest of the Southwest, that was not a good meeting in that sense. Or thought that idea. Wecker's got to work with the rest of the Southwest and got to lead into Gloucestershire, Wiltshire and Somerset. Part of its DNA between. So I think there's a map on regional bus networks. We're going to do it, but no one's doing it. So this is the body with Peninsula needs to do it. So perhaps that could be looked at, Chair, and some work on express networks can be looked at because buses need to cross the border. On rail, I want to say on rail, Metro West is very important to us economically, Portishead,
generous.
Okay, just finish it. Filton, Gloucester, Charterfield, the length to Wiltshire. We just need to make sure that they don't seem to kind of restore your railways, but it seems economic development for this region. And those stations come forward, including Stroudwater and Gloucestershire.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Take very much what you said. Sorry, I don't know your name.
So I'm Christina Biggs, representing the Bristol Rail campaign, which used to be called Ferndale Suburban Bristol Railways, or known as Fotherburg. So yeah, we've just gone for a slightly snappier name. So our campaign group, we campaign for Metro West, which Dave mentioned. So we're very delighted that Ashley Down Station is delivered on Fridays, crowds of people, a lovely atmosphere. Obviously Portway before that, and Metro West Phase 1 and Portishead. So we had a big rally at Templemead Station to express our support for Portishead Rail, and I hope Western Gate will do the same. As Dave pointed out, it's not a sort of steam train cute thing, it's actually a real economic need for Portishead because it's ridiculous number of queues on the M5 roundabout. It's just a ludicrous situation there, so please support Portishead. What I've come today to talk about is zonal fares. So in Bristol, we've been very lucky with the Southern Beach line, quite cheap. As yet, we haven't raised the fares on there, but what's that meant is that now we've got Ashley Down, we've got Bedminster. It's here I look at savings I put in. There's a big imbalance in fare structure. So it'd be good if it was a zonal system like in London, so there wasn't that disparity with length of journey. Obviously timetable. So Ashley Down's now in, but at the moment the train just goes to Port Level and comes back again. We're aware the reason for that is because we've got Hembury hopefully coming up, and on Portishead coming up, but that'll be a while. So in the meantime, it'd be really good if we could hook Ashley Down, Stapleton and Lawrence Hill into the regional trains, because at the moment people living there have to go south to go north again, and just several changes. So yeah, it would be good if especially Metro West service to Westbury and to Gloucester, it'd be really good if they had Lawrence Hill, Stapleton Road, and Ashley Down now. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and your statement was also very interesting and well said. And thank you for adding to it. Would you like to add? No. You're just here. And another gentleman coming in. Sorry, I don't know your name. Can you?
My name is Gary. I'm going to on behalf with David Redfall, obviously with the bus campaign and the transport and rail industry. And obviously, as like David said, it's about the National Express and the Megabus services. I mean, at one time, we used to be Megabus running from Bristol up to Birmingham, early hours in the morning. Literally both ways from Birmingham to Bristol, Bristol to Birmingham. Now, I think the first coach now, I think it's about 8:55 in the morning on Cheltenham. And when I looked at the timetable, which they changed from the 1st September, I think it was absolutely appalling, really. Services, because at one time you used to be 6 coaches down throughout the day from morning to evening, and 6 coaches back, literally from south to north. Now there's probably only about 4, and I think even some of them, I think only one on a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. So really speaking, so if you go out to Bristol for a night out weekend, on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you get the 22:05 service from Bristol Wall Street, which will lead us to Glasgow all through the night. If you go down on a weekday, from Monday to Thursday, Glasgow at 8:30 at night. Well, that's no good. I used to travel up early hours in the morning from Bristol. When I used to work down there and all that, I travelled on the 10-3 coach, and it was very, very handy. Basically, at the same time, it was convenient to get back home. And not only that, we save a lot of money on hotels, you can send and get back home, with a straight to bed. The other sort of important thing for National Express at the moment is apparently there's nothing more. With the £33 million, what they've just built up, just off the junction of the M5 or Sport near Cheltenham, which is a transport hub, very, very nice. We've been up and viewed it, me and Dave went up and looked at it, it was very nice. But National Express will not win there at the moment because apparently they cannot get to the second run, which is the coach. So they need so it's been brought up. They need to rectify that. They need to get that sorted out so the coaches can get in because it is a transport hub. It's a major interchange. It's literally straight off the motorway straight in, which is very convenient for Megabus and for National Express and for Flixbus, and they're the other coach operators which work there. Also, so it's very, very handy. But like Dave said, we need, Megabus, they need to get some sorted, and also National Express as well. They need to get some services, down towards the southwest. I mean, even Megabus now got even run from west to Supermare. It's shocking.
Thanks so much, Gavin. Thank you for your time. Thank you. I think that's the end of our public speakers. You are, of course, more than welcome to remain for the rest of the meeting and hear what we're talking about. So let me move on to item 5. Ben, yes, Ben, you are here. So these are, we have had some written updates circulated. We're also going to get some verbal updates, I believe. Ben, on behalf of DFT, would you like to give your update to us, please? This is where we find that Ben is not. Oh, here we go. Here he is. Lovely.
I'm here. Sorry, this is the first meeting, so I think Ross might be the one who might be updating.
I'm sorry. But Ben or Ross, whoever it is, please could you do your update? Hey,
that
Ross.
is fine. I think we hadn't corrected the agenda, so that is honest. Yes. So I had a look back at your previous meeting, and there was a piece on the government's missions. So I won't go over that again. But I didn't see anything on Secretary of State objectives, which of course you may already be aware of. But I thought it's worth just running over the 5 kind of departmental objectives going forward, which is on improving railways, performance of the rail of British Rail Services, improvements of bus services as well as 2 of the things. And there's a piece on transforming transport infrastructure, which is largely a social mobility, regional uplift and inequality kind of target. There's a piece then on greening transport and a piece on integrated transport as well. So those are sort of 5 things that the department's focused on. You may also have picked up on our Secretary of State creating a sort of new motto for the department, which is to move fast and fix things. So we're under instructions to act quickly and try and make things work better. So those are sort of sitting in the background, and various pieces of strategy and policy will follow on the back of that. But that's sort of headlines of direction. Obviously, at the moment, the thing that we're all working on and preparing for is budget. I think firstly, you will have seen all the mood music from the Chancellor and the government in press, but this is going to be a challenging budget, particularly for end of this year and going into next year. So setting expectations there. Those conversations are currently ongoing between Department and Treasury. Secretary of State is fighting the corner, but it is undoubtedly a difficult situation, and the department is not a protected department and is likely to come under some pressure, so we should be all aware of that. There is sort of in the background of this an attempt to try and protect some of the, well, as much as possible, the local authority funding, and there's a broad sort of sense going around that highways maintenance might do less badly, or we try and hold that funding up a bit. So again, you get a sort of sense of kind of direction of travel for the department on that. What's likely to come out in the budget will be very high level with detail to follow. So that's the other thing we've been told. So this is going to be buckets of funding and then detail to come out after that. We then move into very rapidly after that the spending review process, which will come out in the spring. There's still a little bit of clarity to be picked out whether that's going to be 2 years or that it'll be actually a full 3-year SR. I wouldn't say that's going to be positive, but it should be. We think it should be a little bit more positive than the budget's going to be, but it's likely to be challenging certainly the start of that period, and then hopefully sort of ramping up after that. There is also a capital review the department's doing that was announced when the new government came into office. There's nothing really in the public domain on that at the moment. Our understanding is that it will probably provide sort of a high level, quite narrow view on the budget, and we'll be advising on that. Likely maybe in the space of having some sort of principles of how we will allocate funding, and then we'll get into a more detailed appraisal of projects going into the SR. So capital review is there. It's an important part of what the department's doing, government's doing, to have a look at where our funding needs to be targeted, but likely again to be more detail in the SR, and you'll find it in the budget. The other thing I wanted to flag is the integrated national transport strategy. There's the start of discussions internally on that. We will be, as a department, starting to gather information from around the country on how to kind of put that together. And STBs are like to be in the front seat of that, so expect outreach and to use your convening power across your members to help inform and shape that process. But that's all very nascent. I think the last thing I'll touch on is just sort of quick update on STB funding. We are awaiting budget. There's no specific readout from ministers at this point, and after budget, we'll be putting advice up on STBs. So a little bit of a holding pattern on that. So that's kind of where we are. We're all kind of caught up in this budget conversation at the moment and the back and forth on that. And we're waiting for that before we get more detail on the various projects and policies that will fall out from it.
Thank you very much, Ross. I promise we won't give you a baptism of fire for your first meeting. I'll take Chair's prerogative and ask the first question, if I may. I understand exactly what you're saying about budget, but obviously, as an STB, we're trying to do some planning into the future, etc. Have we got a date for a date where we feel? I understand we haven't got a date when we're going to get it, but do we know when we may know when we're going to hear the budget?
The budget itself.
As far as coming down to the STB, yeah.
STBs. No, I don't have a full sense of that. It will depend on what happens after budget, and it's one of those things where there'll be a whole bunch of advice going up for clarity. So some of it will depend on how much detail comes out in the budget, and like I say, I think our expectations that'll be quite low. I would be hopeful we can do that early in the new year, which I think is kind of where the team's talking about, but it will be contingent on ministerial time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hadley, you put your hand up first.
Thank you. Yes, it's an old record, but the M4 South Coast study was sort of wrapped up in the strategic investment work. It would be really helpful if that could be unwrapped, if we could have sights of the outcome of the Highways England's work on that. I don't know if you've got any news on when we might be able to see something on particularly the M4 South Coast study, which affects about 5 or 6 of the local authorities in this area.
That's fine. I don't. I will take that away and we'll get you an answer on that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Alice Darling, National Highways. So my understanding is that it will be wrapped up as part of the RIS 3 announcements as and when later soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris Wilmore from South Gloucestershire. We have more of Alice's motorways than just about any other authority in the country. And certainly we're not alone in the extent to which the National Rail and the National Strategic Highways Investment Programmes are really significant blockers to our ability to quickly deliver on the economic growth and the housing agenda. So we've got a commitment. We've been moving really forward on our local plan. We're delivering on previous government's figures. We'll deliver on the new government's figures. But just about everywhere we turn, we are hit by implications for either the rail network or the nationally strategic highway network. And the inability, I understand why the government's having to do things the way they are, but there's something for us about the speed with which we can move to at least prioritise decisions is holding unitary authorities back in being able to really move quickly with getting those housing sites allocated and granted consent and getting them delivered. So we kind of need a bit of help from you in getting that prioritisation and getting clarity about which bits of motorway and which bits of rail are going to be delivered by you or what timelines, so that we can deliver the housing. We want to deliver that, you know, what's more important than giving everybody a secure, affordable home, but we need something back from you fairly quickly.
Can I just echo that from a Gloucestershire point of view? I think this is critical. We understand very clearly the messages coming out from the central government about priority around growth and housing, but hopefully central government understands the priority that has to be given to infrastructure, because we are not going to get growth and we are not going to get housing. The two go together. We cannot cannot build more housing without the necessary infrastructure. And we really have, I think, we have the schemes and we're keen to crack on. We just need that clarity of view from central government to allow us to really push on and start delivering against those growth and housing agendas. We've seen the NPPF and we've seen the new housing targets, and those housing targets are predicated. It's not possible to deliver that housing without that infrastructure. So we hope that at central government level there is that joined up thinking.
Yeah. So I mean, that is understood. There's always this complexity and competing sort of departmental and governmental objectives. We will continue to push that. On the specifics, we can kind of get into the discussion probably offline about where you've got specific challenges and how we can bring those forward. So it is understood. I think we're in a challenging time though as well at the moment. But if there is a clear tension here between needing to balance books and also make sure we deliver on the growth agenda, which the government's very keen on. We understand that, and we'll continue to try and push for more clarity as rapidly as possible.
I think, it would be fair to say that, so I come from a different UA, but would say exactly what the other UAs have said, and I believe everyone would, that at the moment, some of us are at different stages in our local plans, etc. But absolutely, I think we can say the negative is true. If we don't get clarity and we don't get investment, we won't be able to do the housing and the growth that we're being asked to do. Where if we do, we stand a fighting chance of being able to do it. So, on behalf of the whole board, I think a plea to you is the sooner we can get on with this, the quicker we'll be able to deliver what we know the government wants us to deliver, and we want to obviously create safe homes for our residents as well.
Well, we'll continue to push.
The key word, sustainable.
Of course. Yeah, well, we'll continue to push that message.
Thank you. Has anyone else got anything else they'd like to ask? Thank you very much. You are, of course, more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but totally understand if you need to go somewhere else. The next two updates are Network Rail and National Highways. So maybe nice because we want to see how all those link together. Network Rail, Matt, where are you? Oh, there you are. Hi, Matt.
Hello, thank you very much, Chair. I'm assuming you can hear me. I've got two devices going, but I'm going to keep talking. Joe is with me. Usually it's Jamie. Joe's here this afternoon from Wessex, and between us we'll just do 5 minutes on some pertinent issues from our perspective on the railways for the board this afternoon. Ross has covered the spending review. One of the early decisions for the new government was the initial spending audit saw a raft of savings across DfT, and of course that included the Restoring Your Railway programme. However, schemes that were within that fund can make their way forward as enhancements judged in and of their own right. Portishead is one of those schemes, actually, and the Portishead branch scheme is currently with DfT for a decision on delivery. And we expect that decision to come out with the spending review perhaps in the spring. It won't surprise folk that we have been working across Network Rail to get our portfolio and proposals in order to inform some of the decisions in that spending review. But like everyone else, we wait with interest to see what the picture looks like for enhancements funding, and that has necessarily meant that we're in a period of building cases and necessarily waiting for decisions on investment. But that doesn't mean to say that we've not been able to make some improvements with partners over the last few months, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But the other sort of headline issue that you'll be interested to hear about is, of course, industry reform, where in the last month we've had the creation of Shadow GBR, that's Great British Railways, so an integrated body that kind of is the future of the railway industry structure following the various reviews over the last few years. The formal establishment of GBR will require a fairly complex bill. The new government set out 2 railways bills going through legislation. The first of those is the public ownership bill, and that will effectively allow franchises to transfer back to public operation, so operated indirectly through DFT. That has already been through the House of Commons and is in the second reading in the House of Lords. The other bill to set up GBR proper will take a little bit longer, and therefore the establishment of shadow GBR is intended to allow some of those sort of forward-looking whole system decisions to be made. That's a joint venture between Network Rail, the DFT, and what's called the operator of last resort. So we expect to be able to continue the story of rail reform as we get further into this parliamentary term. I mentioned a number of service improvements, some of the headlines that you'll be aware of. So we now have a Saturday service between Bristol and Oxford, which has been a great development, and hopefully presages something that we'd like to see much more regularly than Saturdays only. We are drawing near the end of the period of Cross Country's emergency timetable as well, which will have affected some in the region. And actually, with sort of better news on the horizon, with a small influx of new trains will help bolster Cross Country services next year. Great Western also have a proposal to introduce some new trains, and actually what we're finding across the patch is that one of the constraints to improving services is indeed the rolling stock that is required to operate those services. So we're supporting in both of those endeavours, and that will link up with the final point we'll talk about briefly, which is the decarbonisation opportunity. In terms of our strategic development work that we've conducting jointly with Western Gateway and partner organisations, we will be sharing the final Wiltshire Rail Strategic Study report this week. The Wiltshire report will set out a vision for service improvements that support sustainable growth in Wiltshire and really allow the rail network there to play its full role in that, and includes some recommendations that will hopefully be very familiar. So an hourly train between Paddington and Westbury, which was in the Devizes Gateway interim feasibility study, and of course increasing the frequency of the Trans-Wilts service as well. There are a couple of high priority interventions, investments that are required. We're recommending in the Wiltshire study, including a new platform at Westbury. Again, that's in the Devizes interim feasibility study as well. And that's something we'll return to because we've very successfully worked together to some of the seed funding for some of those kinds of concepts. And I think increasing the Westbury platform is one that we need to jointly look at, and that will tie into something that Joe will talk about in just a minute. I'll hand over to Joe now, if that's all right. Joe, to talk through Salisbury and then the SOBCs, if you don't mind taking over.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Matt. So in terms of the strategy work that's ongoing on the Wessex side of things, we're currently in the middle of undertaking what we're calling the Salisbury Area Strategic Study. So that looks at the future requirements for the Salisbury signalling area, sort of the next sort of 30 years or so, linking into the strategy that Matt just talked about, the Wiltshire strategy, as well as Wessex's West of England line strategy that was published a few years ago, and the general rolling stock changes that we're probably going to be seeing in that part of the world in the coming years, in line with decarbonisation targets and rolling stock coming to end of life. So we're currently waiting on a few pieces of analysis from our internal economic and passenger analysis teams. So to have that will feed into the strategy, and we're also waiting for some outputs from our engineers. So looking at if there are any track layout changes or signalling changes required to help deliver those services. So we'll hopefully have something in the next few months to share with yourselves. I know James and Hattie, you've both been in attendance with the steering groups on that, so hopefully there's you've got a good idea of what's going on with that. Elsewhere in the region, we have got a number of SOBCs, which yourselves at Western Gateway have been helping us to fund and deliver. Initially, so the Heart of Wessex line SOBC, so that's looking at services from Weymouth up towards Gloucestershire. So that's actually completed now. I think, James, you've got a copy of that if anybody wants to see it, or else you can ask us. And I think Jamie, when he's back from leave, wants to set up a conversation around next steps for that. So sort of how we take the SOBC forward. And what would be required for that. Otherwise, we have the Tisbury Loop SOBC. previously known as the Salisbury to Yeovil Service Enhancement SOBC. So that's looking at enhancing the services between Salisbury and Yeovil, unsurprisingly, but also looking at the potential performance improvements that any infrastructure requirements could deliver. So we'll be looking at modelling performance because we know that Tisbury's a bit of a problem area for performance on the West of England line. So we're currently remitting engineers to pull out some intervention assessments for that, and then we can build the strategic outline business case around that. And then the final SOBC we've got on in Wessex is what we are calling the Dorset Metro. So that is looking at additional services between Wareham and Brockenhurst. A timetable work's already been completed, and again we're at a similar stage with the Tisbury stuff in that we are just waiting for engineers we're waiting to remit engineers to then tell us what infrastructure we are looking at to build a business case around. So Matt, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Joe. And just very briefly, so I'll end with my sort of standard clarion call around. It brings a few of these things together. The need to replace rolling stock, our ageing diesel trains across much of the Western Gateway area, and the opportunity to deliver a more sustainable train fleet and deliver timetable and service improvements at the same time. So in the early 2030s, we know that we're going to need to find some new rolling stock to replace many of those services. And we're working very closely with DFT and with SWR and GWR to make the case that actually we should be looking at something which is not a diesel train, and that will require some infrastructure, some charging infrastructure as well. And there is an opportunity, and I'm afraid I'm not able to really crystallize this just yet, but I think it's important for members to be aware that there's an opportunity to influence the decision that needs to be made around rolling stock replacement. That's a real opportunity, I think, for the railway throughout the Western Gateway area, and one that really fits right within our strategic timeframes now. So that's one that we will return to both as a STB and with individual authorities as well. So that's all from Joe and I today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hadley, you're first again.
Sorry, new people in the room, time for hands. The rolling stock replacement is really interesting, and partly because the change in use. It used to be, certainly from our area, getting people up to London for commuting, and now it's far more about leisure. That includes for me transporting bikes on the railway, and it's been made increasingly more difficult over time to do that. So there's something about whether, if there's an opportunity within the rolling stock to actually reassess the value of encouraging those sustainable journeys where you can keep your bike and know when you get back to station it's not missing because you had to leave it there because you couldn't get on the train. The other one was around whether GB trains actually gives opportunities to integrate services better. And I know historically what are now the cross-country trains, before they were, when it was British Rail, I'm old enough to remember that, and they were always the ones that were delayed because they crossed all the other lines. But are there opportunities to actually think, are we going to see a breakdown of the compartmentalisation that gives Great Western and SWR perhaps primacy over their networks? Will that continue?
Thanks, Ed. So in reverse order, I mean, absolutely, that's the purpose. And there's some of the flaws you've mentioned there are ones that have been picked up in those reviews that I've mentioned. So that is one of the reasons for creation of GBR. Of course, there are also sort of timetable reasons sometimes why it's difficult to do these things, and we shouldn't wait for GBR to improve some of them either. But yes, that is part of the kind of the whole ethos of a guiding mind organisation, that we'll be able to look at things like interconnections and optimising those certainly for specific journeys. I mean, it's impossible for everything to be well connected to everything, but I think we can think more sensitively about specific flows that would make sense to optimise. And yes, absolutely, the theory is having a single guiding mind will allow that kind of decision making. Which can sometimes be difficult at the moment. And on the first question, so absolutely hear the point around bikes on trains. That's been that's absolutely a hot topic and is well made. And one of the things that folk can do is make sure that continues to be heard. I think, because as ever there will be choices and there will be options for layouts and things like that. And one of the things that people can do is make sure that views on what those choices should be are very well heard. I can't really say much more than that, but it absolutely is the opportunity at the time at which you're kind of potentially procuring new trains.
Hi, thank you, Matt. Thank you for the update on the Wiltshire Rail strategy. That's good to move ahead on that. I will ask Sam to work with your team on some comms. my second point is, notwithstanding the cancellation of the RYR programme, obviously the Caution RYR case was at the DFT and has been there for a very long time. Do you have any advice on where that is, on what, where that might go now, particularly given the Bristol-Oxford service enhancement that you've spoken about? Thank you.
Hello, thanks, Tamara. So we know that anything that was part of RYR needs to sort of stand on its own 2 feet, but in that sense, it's no different really than it would have been had we approached a new station proposal before RYR. I think there will be communication around the decisions from the point of view of RYR, and it's kind of intuitive that since there is no fund there now, that fund won't be able to keep Caution going. That doesn't mean to say that it doesn't still have the same strength as a proposal. And of course, as you rightly say, one of the things we're very clearly noted was the opportunity sits with a new service such as the Bristol-Oxford service. So I think that kind of puts it in the probably more natural logic of making the case for that service and try and have that introduced on a permanent basis, and then that gives you the opportunity to once again make that case strongly for a Caution station. So I think it will involve another process of submission, because, as I say, the RYR programme is no more, but the work to date is it stands and it's good, and actually I think because of what we've talked about with the potential for a Bristol-Oxford service, that that is an encouraging development.
Yeah, thanks very much, John Andrews from Dorset Council. I'm very encouraged to hear something about the digital loop. It's really good. That's been on the plan for decades, and it really needs to come to fruition. So I'm really pleased to hear that. My other point is the Gloucester to Weymouth line that you mentioned is not really encouraging people to get on the train. It takes 2 hours 30 minutes to get from Dorchester to Bristol 10 minutes, which certainly needs improvement. And then there's the technology involved in getting that train to Bristol, where the driver has to stop, put a token in the box. So I thought we'd moved away from that kind of technology by now, and I just wondered what we can do about it.
Yeah, so the Heart of Wessex Line SOBC that I say we've finished now is looking at not necessarily improving end-to-end journey speeds, but looking at improving generalized journey time by offering one train every hour rather than the current one train every 2 hours. In terms of the signalling, I think everybody appreciates that token signalling is certainly of a time and would be something, as the line is looked at from a network level, we'd be looking at improving that, but that's sort of outside of the scope of the SOBC itself, and that's with our signalling and engineering colleagues who know a hell of a lot more about that than I do. But no, excellent points definitely taken, and I'm sure if you want to see a copy of that SOBC, then I'm sure James can share that with you.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've got a question. I've got two questions actually. I think you were around for the previous bit when we were talking with Ross from the DFT. We are being challenged very firmly about growth and housing, about jobs and where people live, and obviously the middle bit of all that is transport, and also then transport to health, leisure, retail, everywhere else. And increasingly we're being told, and we all fundamentally believe, that we want to stop unnecessary car journeys between the areas, and we want to have more sustainable travel. So where I'm getting to is, how can we best work with you in terms of working out, when suddenly we know there's going to be big growth in housing, how that fits in with the rail network. And my second question, I'll get them both out at the same time, and I always ask this, I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a hobby horse of mine. One of the things we can do to aid congestion on some of our roads is to try and get more freight on the rail. And we talk a lot about passenger and passenger rail. We don't really talk that much about freight and rail, and I know there are lots of complexities around it, but I wouldn't mind a little bit of an update about your thoughts on that, and also how we can best plan for growth on the rail network as well.
Yes, thank you. Fabulous questions. We could do 2 or 3 hours, I suspect, but let's try for a minute or two. So first of all, if you like, sort of transport-led development and the need to for the railway and the wider transport system to respond to development is absolutely why Joe and I have jobs. There are people, but we are not the people who are interested in the railway in and of its own sake. It's about connecting people and harnessing economic growth, etc. Now, on a superficial level, I think you have the right contacts in terms of the strategic planning teams. We have the right, I think, a good alignment between strategic timeframes as well for substantial residential developments and strategic rail planning. And one thing that I think is encouraging about the current situation is that we're not, for that reason, about timeframes, we're not looking for lots and lots of delivery funding necessarily right now to support things that are currently allocations in local plans. We are looking at enough funding to keep, to grow ideas and to understand what options there might be. And actually, I think we've got a good record of working together to really understand the role of the railway. It's not everything in that transport problem for supporting development, but to be able to fairly clearly come to a joint view of what we think the role is. And we are finding increasingly, and I think we will continue to find, that if we're not able to say what the investment in the railway will do in terms of supporting those wider government objectives, then we're not going to be able to harness any improvements at all. So I think the kind of conversations we already have with member authorities are really crucial for that. And my team, and I know Joe and his team, are increasingly trying to get into the world of spatial planning as well as strategic rail planning. Something that I think is absolutely critical and should be core to our job. So if you feel like there's more that we can do, we're always open to that. In terms of freight, yes, I'm absolutely conscious that we rarely speak of it, particularly in these updates, but that doesn't mean to say there isn't a huge amount going on. You'll be aware of the joint forum, the Southwest Freight Forum, with Peninsula Transport, and we've identified one or two really key opportunities in terms of specific markets and specific terminals, if you will, but also obviously the wider imperative to up the level of rail freight and the modal share of freight volumes. Actually, in a much less sort of centralised market, so freight operators obviously are private entities and actually make their own decisions about what is economical. In some ways, that makes it easier because we know what we need to do is be able to provide the capability for the network, and of course, in a GBR world, thin out some of the thicket of complexity and about getting freight onto the railway. But we're really increasingly clear sense of where investment would be beneficial. It can be harder to sell that we should invest in the railway network to support rail freight, but we have a good pipeline of schemes that we think would help to do that. And it's one that, as I mentioned, through the Southwest Freight Forum and other work streams, we're really keen to sell those benefits to local authorities as well. And that's one of the really key things. As I've said, it's a little bit harder to pull the levers and make it happen, and hence we often see a focus on schemes that improve passenger services. But again, it's about being clear and evidence-led in our recommendations, and then being able to speak with consensus to potential funders. But please do be assured, because we don't speak of it as often, it does not mean it's not an equal focus for us in Network Rail.
Thank you.
Sorry, I would.
Oh,
Sorry,
Joe.
I was just going to add on that sort of relationship between road and rail in terms of freight as well. It's slightly outside of the Western Gateway patch, which is why we didn't mention it. But in the Wessex team, we are currently working with National Highways on a joint piece of work, looking at the corridor between Southampton and Basingstoke, trying to reduce road congestion in terms of freight by increasing the offer on rail. So there is definitely work ongoing in the background.
Brilliant. And in terms of the reprovision of rolling stock and us getting input into the kind of things we'd like to see, is that ongoing now, or is there a timeline around when you'd like to see any of the suggestions we've got?
So we're working closely with our operator colleagues, and I think we're about to embark on a bit more of a kind of stakeholder engagement activity. So the time is coming, absolutely. That's certainly the case for some of the replacement of the Great Western fleets, and I think you can expect to hear some more comms probably before the next board meeting. Joe, do you want anything you want to add in terms of the SWR fleets?
Yeah, there's a piece of work ongoing looking at it from a sort of a decarbonisation point of view, because obviously that's the only bit of the SWR fleet that isn't currently electrified. So that's looking at more of a sort of short-term solution to try and bridge the gap between the end of life of the current units and sort of a wider replacement of the mainline fleet. So I'm not particularly plugged into that workstream, so I don't know what the scope is in terms of layout on the trains and things, but we can definitely find that out. But there will be opportunity upcoming to input to that conversation.
Lovely. Thank you both very much indeed. I obviously extend the welcome for the rest of the meeting. It would be lovely if you can stay. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Can I use this as an opportunity for a plug? What sort of questions you want to ask you? Network Rail run a Network Rail breakfast periodically, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours, really thrashing through some of this. And if anybody around the table gets an invite to it, can I really encourage you to go along? Last one I've seen the elected member there. I thought very lovely, absolutely brilliant. James and I came away promising that we would encourage more people to attend. Well plugged. This is a really good way to find out what's under the skin of some of the things that Matt's been belting through at a rate of knots.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, and thank you, gentlemen. Alice, it's over to you.
Renee, Alice Darling, National Highways. So I'll put a paper in your pack, so I won't go into much detail at all today. But just a few headlines to collect. So on the risk setting, to the timing of the election means we've still got a huge amount of uncertainty to the investment programme beyond March next year, which obviously is quite fast. We are hoping more anticipating a good deal of clarity following the budget on that on the way forward. We will be in a much clearer position after that. I think this is the first meeting since the Chancellor's announcements at the end of July on cancellation of the Stonehenge scheme. So I need to mention that today. Obviously, it's a difficult decision, we understand, based on affordability reasons, which is obviously disappointing for being involved in developing and promoting that scheme. However, we are following DfT's instruction on that and bringing the project to a close. To finish on some good news, the A417 scheme in Gloucestershire is going great guns. Construction for that is making really good progress. And fingers crossed for a kind autumn and winter set weather. So that the team have won a project team award recently. There has been some really successful public tours of the site, and there are a couple of smaller local schemes for accessibility and environment that are associated with the scheme that are highlighted in the pack. And I'll finish there because I know you want to move on to other topics as well.
Very much, Alice. I was looking for Councillor Hadley, but not this time. Anyone else got any points we want to raise or questions for Alice? You must look at it all in your paper. Thank you. Very, very appreciated. Thank you for coming along. So we're going to move on now to item number 6, which is you'll see it at paper A at your list, and it is our draft business plan, and it is for approval. I'll ask James to present it for us.
Thank you, Chair. I've got just a couple of slides for those who haven't been able to get onto the Wi-Fi or haven't got access to the paper. Hattie, could you bring up the couple of slides for the business plan, please? Thank you. Right, well, the business plan, this has been required to be produced at very short notice. It does feed into what Ross was talking about in terms of the spending review and the autumn budget. We only got the guidance at the end of August and had to be submitted on the 30th of September. So it has been quite tricky to pull together in such a short space of time. It's based around the guidance that the Department of Transport issued us. It's assuming that the level of funding stays the same as this year. So that's £996,000 in total. We were asked to shape the plan around the government's 5 missions and also the 5 Secretary of State priorities, which Ross also mentioned, and also the devolution agenda as well. The intention is to keep the programme going from this year, to keep the momentum going. So focusing on the various key areas, this is a slightly abridged version of the table in the report, but it means focusing on the strategic transport plan and the strategic investment plan work, rural mobility, rail, freight, electric vehicle charging, the regional centre of excellence work, and coach strategy, and allowing an element of contingency budget as well, which is part of the guidance. There is a lot in this programme. If you look in Appendix 1, you'll find a lot more detail, and also how each of our work streams contributes to those 5 missions and five priorities and the devolution agenda. It perhaps should be seen as perhaps more of a shopping list, that we're probably going to struggle through all of these, and especially if we don't get that 996,000 total budget to work with. The Department for Transport did ask us to set out scenarios for 20% more funding and 20% less funding. 20% more funding, I think the general feeling around the other subnational transport bodies is that's probably quite unlikely, but it would enable us to expand our programme. Whereas with 20% less, that would bring us back down to roughly the budget we had in 23-24, which would mean cutting back on some of these key areas, but we would just about manage to keep going most of the programme. One other request from the Department of Transport was to produce a 1-page summary. Can you bring up the next slide, please, Hattie? I mean, this sets out what we do, what are the benefits to our members, what we're going to do next over the next 3 years. Hattie, can you bring up the next slide, please? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And also, how does it support the government's missions? This was a very set in, just go back a slide, please, Hattie. You jumped too quickly. It's a very set in stone template, this one. There was very little flexibility in terms of any extra space. So it crams in an awful lot, it has to be said, and it was difficult to strike a balance between setting out how we want to support the government's new agenda, particularly around housing and kickstarting economic growth, but also reflecting all the work that's going on currently with the subnational transport body, and work that wouldn't necessarily have been undertaken if it wasn't the Western Gateway being in place. So it is a bit of a mixture on this slide, but it does try to capture everything that's going on and what's going to be happening, and that need to support the whole growth agenda. There are a couple of recommendations. Just go on to the next slide, please, Hattie. Because the deadline to submit the business plan was Monday, the 30th of September, we're really asking the board to retrospectively approve the business plan as set out in Table 1. But if there are changes required, then to delegate those changes to the programme team, working alongside the chair and vice chair. But the plan has gone in the shape of Table 1 to the Department of Transport, and then we wait and see what's going to happen next. Ross mentioned about it might be early next year before we get to hear how much funding we hope to have in 25-26. So I'll pause there, Chair, and have lots of questions.
First of all, can I say major thanks to the officers, because the timeline that was given was phenomenally challenging. So thank you very much for pulling it together. It obviously is not ideal the way that it had to do in the timing of the meetings, but we are grateful for doing that work. Thanks, James. Any questions? Chris?
First of all, I hope we don't have to include recommendation 2 as in our decision. So I hope we'll approve the document as submitted. But I would like to suggest that we do need a different recommendation 2. All of us are at that stage being really excited by the really very clear agendas we're being set around tackling the housing crisis and tackling economic growth both in a sustainable way. And we're all in the midst of rethinking our strategies. This is not a sort of tinkering and rebadging strategies. This is some pretty fundamental stuff that all of us around this table are engaged in. And that creates challenges and opportunities. And we're all, to use the phrase, moving fast to try to fix things. But actually, most of us don't quite. I think I know what South Gloucestershire's model will look like. I think I could put a reasonable stab on some of my neighbouring authorities. But it gets hazier as I go further afield. So I don't know what Hannah's really now thinking, just the other side of Bristol. So we need a stage where we bring all of those together in a private space, in a workshop session, where we can all sit and share where we think we're getting to, and then, begin to understand what our region is going to look like when we've done all of this, and then begin to work out, because forget the region that looked like it did 20 years ago, it's going to look different. And when we can begin to understand what it's going to look like, we can then do something that's really useful for DFT and others. In terms of saying, and these really are the priorities that we need addressing in order to deliver this all in a sustainable way. And a very clear future vision. And to some extent, I understand why the government needed the data when it did, but actually it's almost too soon in that we haven't all had the chance to really bottom out what the change means if we're going to take this seriously. I think what I've heard around this room today and before the meeting, we are all taking it very seriously. Can we have a number 3, which is that we fix a date for a workshop for all of the authorities involved to pull together we think our area is all going to look like?
Yep, James is happily writing that down. I'm very happy to add it tomorrow. I think you wanted to speak as well.
Sorry, my question's a really detailed point. On the rail strategy, in the first bullet point, it says Wiltshire Rail Strategy brackets Transworld Services. Do you mean Transworld Services there?
That's a reference to services from Swindon down through Chippenham, Melksham, Trowbridge, and possibly on to Salisbury, and on to Frome.
The Wiltshire Rail Strategy is broader than that.
Yes, this was just one.
Spoke about other interventions actually, rather than that one.
Yes, I agree. I think things have moved on since that was drafted. So
To get that sort of set in stone.
no, not set in stone.
Can I just echo the point about the need for us to come together, except that the officers have done a lot of hard work to get to where we got to, and that the timetable was unreasonable, and therefore meeting that timetable was an achievement. But I do think we have to have that higher level strategic thing, some of which is not about what's in our work plan, it's about what is our vision of the strategic transport infrastructure as regards meeting those targets around growth and housing. I think particularly for Gloucestershire, there are key things in Gloucestershire that will deliver on that central government, which aren't included in this list, which obviously the list has to be a limited list, but which I think from as a body, we should have that clarity about what are the really strategic bits of infrastructure that need to be delivered across, even if we're not individually as a board working, it's not part of our work stream, but they are part of that wider transport infrastructure vision, and that we need to be communicating, and we as a board should be communicating that up through using our access to the Transport Ministry of Transport to make sure that those things are given priority, because those are the things that will deliver on the housing and the growth. Which I do think as a region we really have got opportunities to be pushing ahead with a lot of this, and certainly in terms of the housing targets that places like Tewkesbury, for example, are getting in combination with Cheltenham and Gloucester. If we're going to deliver that housing, we need the infrastructure. So Junction 9, for example, is one thing that absolutely is critical to meeting that central government objectives. So I, along with Chris, I support the idea that we need to, and to some extent, the fact we're doing it after the fact we're approving, I'm not in any way suggesting we do anything to what we've already done. I'm suggesting that we need to be having that conversation offline if necessary to form views, and then be communicating as the body that to central government to say we can deliver the growth, well, we can deliver the housing that you want, but we need you to be joined up with us in terms of how we do that. Otherwise, you won't get the growth, you won't get the housing, and you will continue to have bottlenecks in the system.
So what I'm hearing, and apologies if I got this wrong, is that the proposal is we keep 1 and 2 as our recommendations, but add in a recommendation 3, which is around as soon as is practicable, get together to have a visioning workshop where we as individual UAs look at what we can bring, and we all know what our vision is, and then we as the team that is the board looking at the region overall can start looking at what priorities should be and having something that we can all sign up to as this is what we need to achieve in order to do anything.
And then that's what we need to be communicating as a sub-national transport board. That vision is what we should be communicating to central government, saying this is how you achieve your targets. This, as a transport board, is what the bits of kit that we think we need to deliver your targets.
Andy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, what Chris has raised is really interesting, and part for me was why did the department ask us about 20% flex up and down? It won't really have been just about doing more or less, and I think that is about what other areas of work do we think we collectively need to do, which probably is the outcome of the workshop. But one area for me would be around micromobility in a wider sense than the cycling strategy we've already been looking at. The other would be autonomous vehicles and how we're preparing for that. So I think that it is partly around what would like their fire if they've got a little bit of money to give out. Are they going to give 20% across the board, or are they going to look for really innovative ideas from areas? And I appreciate the work the team have done, the officers have done on this. But I suppose, if we get asked that sort of question again, there is something about actually, where would we go next? Is probably what they were really after. I don't know. I'm guessing that.
Yep. Okay. I think we've got ourselves in a position where we have to do both. We've got a plan that has been pulled together, but I think very clearly, and we'll have a vote on this in a minute, there is an aspiration for us to then create and form a vision that is, I don't want to call it our mission statement, I don't want to call it anything, but it is, why do we exist? What can we do that no other body can do? And why is that important for our region? So by show of hands, we now have the recommendation 1 and 2 as printed, and the recommendation 3 about pulling together this meeting, well, just call it a meeting, to start the process of that, dependent slightly, I guess, on where the individual UAs are in. There's no point having it until we've got some idea of what's going forward from them. But once we do, get on with that as a matter of urgency. Is that acceptable? Can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you. Is there anyone against? Anyone abstaining? That is carried. Thank you very much indeed. Hannah, moving on to item 7, would you like to introduce it for us, please?
Same plan. Yes, so around this time last year, the board charged us with taking forward the existing rural mobility strategy, some of the recommendations within that, particularly delivering a series of pilot projects for rural mobility. Initial meetings on that in January, then it sort of slightly slid down the chain of priorities for the STB delivery, but it's now resurfaced. So we're in a position now where we're working with Peninsula Transport on this, and between us we now have developed a prospectus, a call for pilots for rural mobility pilots. As part of that work, we've sort of resolved 6 grand challenges for rural mobility that we'd like pilots to seek to address, not necessarily all of them, but at least one. So it's operational sustainability, net zero in rural areas, equitability of rural mobility, and that's both in terms of kind of accessibility but also in terms of cost and other factors enabling people to living in rural areas to get around, get to opportunities in the same way as their urban counterparts. Then we've looked at addressing daily needs in an affordable manner and in a more local area. So such extensive journeys to get to day-to-day essentials. And then the 6th one is to do with tourism-related mobility, recognising how many rural areas of the Southwest depend on tourism for their economic survival and so on. So those are the challenges around which the pilots are framed. And Hattie, you could just move on to the next one, very please. And there's a process here that's been identified to go through where people proposing pilots, which doesn't have to be local authorities, it could be private organisations, it could be community enterprises, it could be parish council, it could be community transport operators, green groups, whatever. The intention is that it's broad, open to anyone with an innovative approach to piloting mobility, and that they develop a funding application to us through an application form and this prospectus that we're putting together. So in terms of the recommendations, I think I put on there on the next slide. Because we want to be able to award this development funding for the pilots, this does mean that we will be seeking to potentially award the funding outside the usual sphere of the local authorities, so potentially to external organisations and community press companies and so on. So we're specifically asking for your approval to do that. So that's using the 50,000 that was identified for that as part of the budget, but explicitly acknowledging that may be awarded externally to the governmental recipients, and for us to assess the applications we receive, the criteria to be able to make those awards. The final one on this recommendation list is sorry. What's come around? I find that because of the extension to the project, it got sort of put to one side for a while. We focused on other more pressing matters. We have incurred some additional costs over the budget that was originally allocated. That's mostly additional project management time from the consultants and some additional work that was needed to do to bring some of the earlier phases of work back up to date with new emerging priorities and so on. So we're looking for your approval to transfer up to 5,000 from elsewhere in the budget to cover that overrun on this particular budget.
Yeah, two sets of questions really. Firstly, a lot of the questions we had today from the public were about the impact of rural transport cars. And those concerns, they're not about tourism, they're not about the niceties of life. They're about, I can't get to work, I'm going to lose my job and then my home, because actually I don't work in the rural economy, I work in the nearby town, and you've just axed the bus to the town. Oh, and I can't get to the doctor because the doctor's over the border in Gloucestershire, and we can't have transport going across the border. Scambia, that would never do. I kind of, is all of that built into that word accessibility in this? Because otherwise I have a problem with the brief, because most of that brief feels about the nice as opposed to the, actually, if we're not going to turn our rural areas into sort of parodies of the countryside, people are going to be able to live there and work who are too young to drive a car, can't afford to drive a car, or have a disability or an illness that means they can't drive a car. And I want to be assured that pilots that address that will read the scheme. But secondly, I'm aware of the really tricky issues that WECA encountered when it ran the West Local pilots, which were a WECA equivalent sort of pilot funding scheme. And the legalities of getting anything set up to pilot, because of just the sheer nightmare. The community council thing can't run paid buses, and just the total headache of it. And we found that really good ideas from community groups couldn't get into the process because there wasn't enough of a support mechanism for them to be able to find their way through that legal nightmare. So could you reassure us that the groups that have good ideas are going to somehow get support to navigate that legal minefield, to be able to turn their aspirations into reality, please?
Okay, so I'll take your first question first about real life in rural areas. Actually, if you could move back to slide 6 for me there, we've got the grand challenges that will help me. But yeah, cheers. So
actually, most of those are around that kind of day-to-day life aspect that you're looking for. The last one is taking it a bit beyond that, and it's about supporting more of the rural tourism economy. But the other 5 elements are intended to mostly be aimed at that, and can people who live in rural area get to stuff that they need to go to in a way where the journey times are proportionate and the costs are proportionate.
It's not about journey time, it's not about cost, it's about the existence of any.
I think it has to be part of the journey time.
Than just, oh, it takes a bit of a long time and I have to change buses twice, or it costs a bit much. There isn't any unless you want to walk 7 miles. We've got biggish towns within the Wecker area that are 7 miles from a bus now. And if that's what's true in the Wecker area, goodness knows what it's like in rural Wiltshire or Dorset.
We have our fabulous DRT now covering quite a bit of the county. Sure, I don't know if that's been shared before in terms of where we are.
I think so, but we can certainly do a note.
Yeah.
It's really such a fundamental disconnect of much of non-urban southwest from anything that approximates to a bus. Let's not be fussy about where, it's a bus tool.
But that car you were indicating you wanted to.
Yeah.
Shall I take up your second question before, which is the one about being able to give out funding?
Oh, right, yes, please, yes, sorry.
I read that's a risk. Because West Midland Biology is our council body, we're concerned and there's experiences that proceeded with other projects run in that authority that sought to give out funding to external organisations. Ben is unfortunately not here today, but she's finance procurement lead for the Western Gateways. She is in discussion with the combined authorities, grant assurance, and people about the process that we're going through, and seems confident that we have a way forward to be able to do that. But one of the steps in achieving that is the explicit agreement of this group that we wish for that funding to go to suitable external. There's a kind of step in the chain with the recommendation. I can't promise it will be seamless. Don't know yet.
Yeah, so obviously 50,000 is not that much money, is it, for honest about it? So it's just the way it's been pitched as one or more proposals. So for one proposal, 15 grand spot, a lot of money to pull together like a business case or something. So I just wondered the way that's pitched, are we going to attract the right kind of bidders that we want to bid into the fund? And if we're talking about councils or community groups, or do we need to maybe advertise it in a different way, because they might be interested in coming in at a much smaller level. But if we say, well, 50 grand, we might give it to one. It might discourage those people from bidding. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Is it better that we do one project that's really successful, or is it better that we do a few and maybe spread our resources a bit thinly? Your views on
The
that.
wider background is that as this is a joint project with Ministry of Transport, they're also doing the same amount of money, so it's 100,000 overall. The intention is that it's best to have at least one project from each authority, and rather than having everything into a melting pot. But at the moment, we're sort of leaving it a little bit open as to, beyond that, one each, how many projects can come forward, and it depends on the nature of them. So 50,000, we're not really anticipating that necessarily there would be delivery of the project. That is, as you said, about working for business case and bringing in more funding from elsewhere. And in some cases, it might only need a smaller investment to achieve that, bringing in additional money that can then contribute to the delivery part. But we would sort of want to leave it open. We're not sure yet about the range of submissions we might get. We had a sort of test called pilots early in the year that informed the development of the prospectus, and there was quite a range. terms of things people were wanting to do with it. So I think, yeah, we were wanting to not be too restrictive, but so even when, you know, you've got a bidding organisation that might only want 10,000 or something, we can divvy that money up in a way that feels appropriate to support the best projects. Like you're saying that you think it's pitching too hard in a way.
Well, like one, if it is one project, 50 grand's quite a lot of money for like a consultant, isn't it? Buying off the shelf report they've probably done somewhere else for 50 grand.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yes, we have to be a bit cautious about that. I think, in terms of our scoring the proposals, the intention is that it goes more to kind of novel solutions from unusual providers. You know, there's been quite a few pilots for rural mobility solutions that target, say, a single type of solution in a single type of area. What we're looking here is either kind of bundling of solutions to create a novel approach that incorporates elements of more than the sum of its parts, or kind of different delivery mechanisms that haven't been tried before, including particularly around using community providers and you know, local people to run some of these things rather than always just the off-the-shelf consultant reports.
I'll be interested to see what happens.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes back. It will be very interesting. I've got Andy and then David.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess for me, and it's interesting because obviously all transport crosses boundaries, and as was said, you know, some of that is people living in the rural community trying to get into the urban areas, and I represent a mostly urban area, but with some rural pockets. I'm interested in sustainability, evaluation, and dissemination. So part of this is about are the proposals that are coming back, you know, are they going to be measured in terms of, well, that's been tried previously, or, you know, it is truly innovative. But also, if we're only able to fund a small amount of money, is it sustainable enough to actually even get underway? Because a lot of transport schemes, it takes 6 months for them to even start to bed in and actually get traction. So I'm concerned in terms of, are we actually going to be able to do meaningful things, to learn from them, to share that, and make sure that, you know, if we're trying something in Wiltshire, that's picked up in Gloucestershire, or, you know, it's made available around the region. I didn't see that in the paper. Has that been covered?
Yes, there's an awfully large technical report that also accompanies the brief and prospectus, in which kind of these things delved into in a bit more detail. In terms of timeframes, the vision is that the pilots would last between 1 and 3 years, depending on the nature of the pilots. So hoping that that's pitched enough that have time to get going and see through an annual cycle or two to kind of see what the results are like, but not so long that you're kind of, it goes beyond being pilots and there's, you know, more investing in permanent service provision. Sorry, I've forgotten the earlier part. Sustainability, and yeah, so that element is about the degree to which there's a learning that comes out of the pilot that can be replicated elsewhere or used to inform that, you know, identification of suitable solutions elsewhere. And as part of that substantial background report, there's quite a comprehensive analysis of existing transport pilots. I think they've looked at maybe 60 or so rural pilots, and drawn out to some degree from them the elements that were successful and the elements that were not successful. And we'll be using that information to kind of shape our view on the proposals that come in and whether they're likely to be kind of successful in the area that they identify, but B, not already done to death elsewhere. So that more comprehensive background report forms part of that analysis.
Thank you.
And then,
yeah, I guess I'm in the sort of hearing the contributions people have made. I've got the same kind of general tendency. It sounds like a very good idea. I'm supportive of the idea. It's not a great deal of money, and therefore what will be the practical outcomes like to be? And the principle that we delegate as a board to the officers to pick the schemes, I would kind of like the board to have, your description of the process that you're going to go through and all the work that you've gone to put the prospectus together suggests that you are like to come to the right outcomes. But I would like to see as a board what those set of schemes that we actually agree to move forward. And we look at them, even if it's not formally, informally, before the button is pressed, can we see that list so that we can shout if we think that there's some issue there in terms of whether it's geography or whether it's going back to the sustainability. I would like to see a variety of different things being promoted that gives us, it's like seed capital. We will scatter the seed upon the ground in the hopes that some things really work, that then can be replicated because they prove to be sustainable in themselves. Once we've got them, given them a little bit of a push with this additional bit of seed capital.
I'm being advised by James, this is what we normally do anyway, that we circulate it round. And actually, you know, sometimes we learn things from doing a trial that doesn't entirely work as well.
Absolutely.
That there's, you know, as long as they are replicable and we know why things worked and why they didn't, that is of value.
Well, I wondered if this comes back round a little bit to something that James mentioned at the top end of this meeting, which was the idea of having a member, dedicated members involved in some of the sections of work, and whether there's a vacancy here for somebody that's particularly interested in rural mobility to take on the role similar to actually others doing in SIP and kind of be more involved in that day-to-day decision making around this.
I think the practicalities of how, I think if we've got a very clear ask that members will going to want to be more involved before irrevocable decisions are made, whether that's via a lead member or whether that's something that we need to get everyone involved. Let's take that offline. Hannah and then Ed.
Yeah, so I'm very supportive of this piece of work. I think it's really critical, and certainly my own area has a great deal of rural communities and difficulties in accessing services. I think the challenges are right. I think one of the challenges for us is, and in fact came up through the West Local process, is that we have across the country community transport schemes which are either voluntary or social enterprise, another legal structure, and I think that there isn't really a sustainable line of funding of those. And I met a few months ago with the National Community Transport Association. I think Bristol had at the same time Rebecca around how to tackle that challenge, and really they were saying that and this is a national issue and it affects some more than others. And I suppose what that leads me to think is in North Somerset, as the areas that I know about, I'm sure it will affect others, there's a risk, for example, that we go out with this sort of that we're trying to create innovation in areas that are losing that they have because they're on sustainable means of funding them. And so there's a question in my mind about we see this sort of funding as not only being about supporting innovation, but about how do we sustain what we have and grow from it, and not purely something that is new. Yeah, exactly that. And so I think there's a bit of a rub here, and something that might, we want to be aware of as we're relating to communities, that the people out there feeling they've been doing some of this stuff for a long time, that they've been not least by authorities that have been usually the last 2 years. And I think we need to think through as we go out through those processes. I know it's something that came through those.
Yeah, I think that the need for sensitivity around this is high, and in some senses 50k with another 50k match funding is a lot of money. In other senses, it really isn't. If it was there to support the groups that were going otherwise. So we've got to try and do some of them maybe through this innovative thing, but the rest from lobbying about people who You know, I can talk about Bays in the same way. You've got areas where there are just no buses.
Yeah.
Bus stop, you know, nothing.
I never quote because we spend a lot of time on a very small amount of money, and I don't think Bristol's going to be vocal much in this because we don't even really have a rural internet, let alone but for only 30% of people drive to work in central Bristol, 60% of them come from outside of Bristol. So this is about connectivity, this is about thinking about cross-border, and I'd like to just ask that I completely agree with David, Kai and Chris that we need a variety of different things so that we can learn. I think I'm really interested to hear from Wiltshire, which I hear is quite a good DRT scheme. Our DRT scheme in West England is not, I don't feel, is doing very well at the moment. So it'd be really interesting to look at what we can learn from some of the existing schemes as well. So I just really would urge officers to really think about a whole variety of things, and also how anything that might actually lead into our overall strategy, where the big money is and the big focus of our work is.
Agree. Anyone else want to make any comments? So can I suggest that we amend our recommendations very, very slightly? We keep numbers 1, 3 and 4 the same, but for 2, we say delegate authority to Western Gateway officers having shared their work prior with members to award a total of 50,000. Yeah, that as a suggested, which just solidifies what you say is going to happen anyway, but we may as well put it in there. That being the case, can I see all those in favour, please? Can I see anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Lovely. And thanks, Hannah. I know it's been a lot of work. Thank you very much indeed. Although we are behind slightly on time, the rest of the papers we've got are mainly for noting. So I hope we will be able to catch up slightly, because I do intend to get us out of here by 4 o'clock, if humanly possible. So no pressure, but with that said, item 8, letter to the Under Secretary of State, James. So just comment briefly on that.
Yes, but this is just as we're introducing the Western Gateway and Amanda as chair to the Secretary of State or the Minister for Local Transport, introducing the STB and just setting out a couple of key areas of work that the STB is undertaking. Just supposed to be just a short letter, so it couldn't really capture everything that was going on. It does flag up the M4 Dorset Coast Study, and can we see that published? But yes, it was just really an introductory letter rather than a detailed explanation about what the STB is about.
And my hope is that this forms part of a ongoing dialogue, and I promise you, I'm probably one of the most inclusive people you will ever meet. So there was, if anyone felt that there was an intention to in any way cut people out, that absolutely wasn't. The senior officers felt it was really important just to get something out there as a placeholder. So next time they get something they can see, and this is what else they're doing, this is what else they're doing. So we hope that's okay tomorrow.
I was slightly surprised that the Stonehenge J303 wasn't included in here, given that strategic importance to the whole region and to Peninsula as well. Now, clearly a decision has been made, but that is not the end of the story. And I think we need to keep that on the agenda. Wiltshire is obviously having those conversations, but I would very much welcome that we also speak with one voice.
Understood. There were just a couple of examples. There wasn't actually everything, and you're right. We will capture everything next time we go.
Just say, very exciting it. I think it's really important that we keep standing the drum. I've been on the board now, not very much a year, and I think from the moment I started, we were saying the challenge we had about giving ourselves a profile that some of the other STBs have, and so the more opportunity that we have to do that and talk about vision, it's really important. But I wouldn't want you to feel as grateful for you stepping forward as chair. I know around 15 months ago there was tumbleweed when we were looking for a chair. So I think thank you for getting it sent. I wouldn't want you to feel hamstrung by the broader board in continuing to have an active dialogue in that way. From my perspective, I'm thinking back to the point that we raised at the very beginning. I think there probably is more that we could do via email or informal mechanisms to, if we need to, check in and just touch base on anything, fine. But thank you for doing the things that I think are really important.
raising our bodies, but absolutely against doing that.
David.
In terms of keeping up communication and direct communication, going back to the need for, that we talked about earlier, to have that the wider vision, that it's not just restricted to the individual projects that we're looking at, but also to keep that focus on the growth and the housing, even though we're a transport board. Really what the transport should be addressing is the economy and housing, because those are the things that are going to be front and centre, and the more we speak the lingo to power, the better I think the chances are that we'll get their attention and supporting what we want to do.
Colin's got something.
Colin.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to reinforce what David said, really. I think we're missing a little bit of a trick, because if you think about Junction 9, for example, it was an approved prioritised scheme by the STB, Junction 9 A46. It's currently at almost at OBC level. It went through the IPDC on the 16th of May and delivers a garden town, which is approved garden communities town, which would deliver anything from 15,000 up to probably 25,000 houses. And in addition to that, there's Junction 10, improvement, which is HIF funded, but again, there's always been STB approved scheme and supported scheme, which is actually at DCO stage at this moment. The next sitting of the examination is on the 15th of October. If approved, it would enable the start of housing that will immediately drive 8,000 houses in a garden village that's been approved again by Homes and MHCLG. So effectively, we've got two really good examples. Granted, both in Gloucestershire, I'm sure there's others, but there are two very good examples of using transport funding to drive growth, which is just what the government want to say. And I've made it very clear that these aren't transport schemes. These are schemes to deliver growth in those areas, that much needed growth. And not only that, what J10, for example, delivers is the 7,000 jobs at the Cyber Park, supporting that housing growth. So what you're looking at probably in that corridor is probably over the next 30 years, those two junctions, 40 to 50,000 houses, and probably almost as many jobs as well. Now, that's exactly what I think the government want to hear and they're looking for. And I know the Homes Communities team have taken that back as part of their prioritisation at a national level to show those two schemes. And I think we're missing a trick if we don't use examples like that to show how we're using transport to drive the growth agenda.
Yeah, no, agreed. And that's obviously what I think what we're all saying we're aiming to do going forward. We were talking about a couple of the historical things that we had been working on last year as examples, but no, taken on board exactly what you said. Thank you. Any more comments? Okay, we note that and move on. James, I think you're on next as well.
Yeah, this is just a note on the revised housing figures, which we mentioned several times this afternoon, already coming out of the National Planning Policy Framework. I think we all know the scale of the challenge, but it's just a reminder of the very large increases in the number of homes that are forecast to be needed to be provided. Across the Western Gateway region as a whole, it's an increase of 34.3%. That compares nationally to only about 21%. And some of our authorities, as you'll be able to see there, Wiltshire, Dorset, parts of Gloucestershire and Bath and North East Somerset, it is getting close to 100%, if not more than 100% increase. So this note was just to try and capture what's happening, but also set out some of the implications. And I think we've really covered a lot of those already this afternoon. So I won't go through them, Chair, but it is all about focusing growth, housing growth, around locations which are going to be more sustainable. The guidance talks about centering around railway stations, for example. This is going to be very, very challenging, given that some of those very high figures are really focusing on the most rural parts of our Western Gateway geography. And if we want a development that is less car dependent, where sustainability is embedded from the start, that's going to be challenging when car use in many of those areas is already very high. And there's issues around things like this new definition of the grey belt, which almost by definition, these are going to be areas on the edge of the green belt, very rural areas. Providing access which isn't relying on car journeys is equally going to be challenging. in the next step section of the note, I set out just a few ideas around refocusing some of the work we're planning to do anyway this year as part of the Regional Centre of Excellence, to refocus that around supporting our local authorities in planning for those new homes. So it's going to be at a very high level. This is not stepping on anyone's toes, and it's not duplicating anything that's already there, but it's working with everybody to try and look at that regional picture, the strategic importance of some transport schemes, because it could well be that delivering housing growth in one area requires transport infrastructure in completely separate areas. They might not be physically joined, might be settled by another local authority. So it's about taking that strategic regional view on transport and how that can help deliver the new housing forecasts. We also have various bits of regional centre of excellence work planned around interchanges and capturing the social value of transport schemes, and we can refocus that as well to help try and demonstrate why the particular interventions are going to be needed to help facilitate that housing growth. We've got a small amount of budget for this. We're going to have to bring in consultants to do it on our behalf because we are very much tied up at the moment with the strategic investment plan work. But as I say, the intention is to provide support to our local authorities to help them go forward. You know, we're there to help them to add value. We're not going to step on anyone's toes here. So overall, this note is really just to try and capture the general picture of what's going on and how the Western Gateway can provide that assistance. So I was going to run through quite a detailed list of report applications and next steps.
So I want to make 2 comments before I open it up as well. You are right to call it a challenge, but as a couple of other people have said as well, this is also an amazing opportunity. If we get this right and we embed the fact that we're no longer going to be car dependent in where we build things, we are going to transform our region. So although the word challenge is appropriate, can we also counterbalancing it with you know, the opportunity that this gives us?
Yeah.
And actually, although, you know, refocus plan regional centre of excellent work that's right, but this has got to feed in to the meeting that we've all been talking about. You know, and that's the reason why I wanted it on this agenda, that I think we've got to get our heads round. This is the key thing that we as a region can deliver, that none of us as constituent individual parts can. So to refocus a lot of work on that, not belittling the other stuff that's going on, I think will bear benefit. And if the government is serious in what it says it wants us to deliver, we have to then say, here's our shopping list then. This is what we need. And we need to be quite good and specific about it. So I think I'm really pleased. I see this as a start point for what it is we're going to want to do, not an end destination. That's my rant over. Has anyone else got any comments on this before we note it and move on?
Just to make the obvious point, that in terms of getting the growth, we have the housing, we have our existing distribution of population, etc. That connectivity is key to growth. Well-connected places that are easy to access and where there is good connectivity, that boosts growth. So we as an STB, we need to keep banging that drum that transport infrastructure, particularly public transport infrastructure, those coach networks, the bus networks, etc., the cycling, etc., all those things are not nice to have. They are things that will generate the growth and avoid housing being distributed willy-nilly around the spot, unjoined up in where the existing transport systems have to bear additional strain, which is unsustainable, and it will not deliver a green, sustainable outcome. It will be a deeply dysfunctional outcome.
Chris?
Yeah. I think I may be wrong, but my impression, certainly my own experience, is that the connectivity between the way we're all addressing this and the rail plans is quite well articulated, and we kind of know where we're going. Aspirationally at any rate, even if they're not yet the delivery plans for Network Rail and others. I think I'm more worried about the articulation of the relationship between these plans and motorway networks in particular, and the extent to which just about all of our motorway network junctions are at or around capacity. And there's a series of bilaterals going on with each the planning authority saying, please, sort out our motorway junctions so that we can have a house of places we think is best in our local authority area. And we're all doing that. Poor outlets and national highways is just, you know, all of us are saying ours is the most important. And that's not because we want people to travel by car. It is simply that actually places where you would put the development to make use of rail also happens to be, for many of us, the places where it would, some of it is going to interact with national highways. And I wonder if there's a mechanism where we can have something that's more joined up than each of the planning authorities having those dialogues, and we could somehow develop a corridor dialogue that really thought about the M5 as a whole, worked with all of us to get some sort of prioritisation into it. That may involve us and Strauss having a little Barney and David having to referee, but so be it.
Yes, of course. So this sort of discussion is absolutely what we've been really keen on for years, let's say. The thought that actually think about transport infrastructure and capacity before we set the locations, because actually we don't like being the blocker to development. Actually, there are spaces on the network that are more able to be adjusted or more able to be build that capacity in, or there may be some existing capacity that could be support growth. So absolutely really keen for this. How can we make that happen? Well, I'm going to go back. And talk about municipalities and see if we can.
To say part of for our growth in rural Dorset, we need comment it. We both know no retention.
Motorways and tradable commodities. I'm not going to answer you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Paper in item 10, strategic investment plan. Hannah.
Next slide, please. So just briefly then, quick review of where we are with the SIP progress. We are still just about on course for delivery at the end of the current financial year, but we've had to program some ways to fit in extended time frame on producing the strategic environment assessment, qualities impact assessment, and health impact assessment. Started a little later than we'd hoped, and this goes take a little longer than we'd hoped. So for that reason, we've had to cut down in public consultation, starting a bit later than we had planned. So it's going to start on the 18th of December, run through to the 2nd of February. But we are otherwise hitting the sort of milestones we set out in the programme to this point. But to note the risk that there is now absolutely no more flex left in the programme for any other delays or anything else to go wrong and hit that delivery date of March. And if we don't do that, we then run into some problems around pre-election period for West England Combined Authority, which is our accountable body, which would mean a delay of the programme until post-election period. So just to note that as a risk, we are doing everything we can to continue to deliver to the timeframe of the board wish, and are on track to do so. Hattie, if you can move down to the next slide. So we're in the process now of assessing the proposals we've received from our partner authorities. Just a brief summary. We had 101 submitted. As of last night, we were considering not taking forward at all 22 of those proposals, of which half of those are because they're duplicates with other authority submissions. So removing the duplicates. So that leaves initially 11 we were going to not progress at all, mostly for the reason that they aren't really regional in their focus, good schemes, but local in their focus rather than regional. Since we introduced one or two of those into the programme, so I need to adjust these figures very slightly from new information just today. 18 proposals we are unable to provide enough information at this time or in time sufficiently well developed for us to meaningfully assess them at this time. So we intend to hold those in the pipeline to the next SIP iteration in around 12 months' time. And there are 6 proposals that we're still kind of debating. So that leaves 56, we're now up to 58 with the 2 reinsertions, plus a potential additional 6, or up to 6 to add on. They're going through for assessment at the moment, and we are due to have done the multi-criteria assessment on those by the end of this month. So we'll have an initial draft prioritisation list by the end of this month.
Any questions on this update that we heard? Okay, paper F. I think I'll see you again.
Let me again. Yes, you again. That's like things, isn't it? Okay. Still a work in progress, likely. Yeah, frantically under the desk. So we have reviewed, consultants Atkins and Sustrans have reviewed the strategic cycle network. We realigned the origins and destinations around which that is framed to align with the decisions taken at the STP. So now those destinations, areas, gateways, and so on that we all agreed as being regionally significant for the development of the STP, have been used as the focus of destinations and origins for the network, and the network redrafted aligned with that. So we now have that sort of map there as our overview of what are the regionally significant routes as a network. Now that one is relatively in its final version now. It's important to note that the lines are sort of indicative. They're not indicating exact routes, but they're indicating principles of connectivity between those destinations. So the exact routing would be developed to the next stage on when we come to do the detailed planning for those routes. But as a general network, that's in its final proposed format for you to consider and for officers to consider. The next slide, please, Andy, is where we are still at much more of a work in progress stage. So that is kind of doing some measure of prioritisation on those routes delivery. So this is where we're looking to score the ways in which those routes provide that connectivity to those key destinations, and the density of those destinations per kilometre along these routes. So this is a work in progress. So the routes that now have the kind of fuzzy shading around them are the ones that are sort of top 50% broadly of the routes. However, there are still some anomalies in scoring that I'm still working through with consultants. So and then we need to take, this slide is much more uncertain than its predecessor. So this is just indicative of work in progress and where we're going rather than finding out bits on there. That's it. Thanks.
You have another opportunity for an online conversation about it, just so that we're all comfortable with it, because there's a lot of devils in the detail. And in particular, I'm worried that we're still showing the wiggly lines. Some of those wiggly lines are because that's what the roads do as well. They're very shrunken pit off of those roads. But in some cases, I slightly worry that what we're doing is expecting the cyclist to go on a circuitous route, whereas the car, it goes on a more direct route. We had that conversation about whether we should have indicative lines rather than wiggly lines. Personally, I still worry a bit about the wiggly line solution, because it does feel much more definitive, and it does sort of make it look as though the poor old cyclist is going to have to go by Bognor. Nothing, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Have you had a Bognor as a child, or you know?
We have 5 minutes left of the meeting and we have 4 more papers, so. Let's probably postpone any conversation about Wagner. But yeah, to your point, Chris, we'll see all the draft before it goes anywhere else. That's lovely. Sorry, Hannah. You again. You again.
Oh, yeah. What was it then?
Oh, it's paper G is just a general update on some of the work areas. It was going to be shared between Hannah, Hattie, and myself. It's just an update on where we are with freight and coaches and EV charging and rail. Rail has been covered already really by what Joe and Matt were talking about. So any questions, Chair, on paper G?
Excellent. Paper H. Ina.
Yeah, Mena's not here today. She's on a project management course. So if I just very briefly talk to it. The key thing is table 1 in that report, which shows how much we've spent so far this year, including committed spend, and we're currently just bear with me a second. We're currently up to £443,930 has been spent so far this year. I've got my paper with me, which out of a total budget of 996, means we're almost spent half, given that we're just over halfway through the year. But given all of our, thank you, Chair. I think we're doing okay in terms of basic message is we're doing okay in terms of this year, and we've got lots of work coming up on the SIP, and then we're going to be paying out the rural mobility grants, for example. So we're fairly confident that we're going to be able to spend up to the £996,000 budget that we have for this year.
Anyone got, I mean, this was circulated in advance. If ever anything is circulated in advance and you've got questions about it, please feel free to ask in advance as well. So I'll just take that as noted. Formal decisions, votes, meeting paper are. James, can you just say if there's anything particular in there?
This was just a summary of the key decisions which come out of all the papers today. The important ones were the ones to do with the business plan and rural mobility, accepting the slight amendments, so we will adjust this table. And the rest of the decisions were just to note the various reports that were being presented.
So, has anyone got any AOB? So, can I thank you all for your attendance? I think it's been a very positive meeting. If it hasn't been, please let us know how we can make it better in future. And I look forward to hosting you all for our next meeting. I close the meeting now. Thank you. 27th of November.